In Russia, being part of the LGBTQ plus community can be summed up in 4 blunt words: suffocating just to survive. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of your door being smashed in. It's not robbers, it's officials and police. Your ex-wife has reported that, while caring for your child, you once took them to a private gathering with LGBT tendencies. Without thorough investigation, the court labels Dmitry an extremist. Under the latest 2026 amendments, anyone associated with an LGBTQ plus identity can be automatically deemed unfit for guardianship. Your child is taken away crying. You kneel on the floor, still holding the sock they hadn't finished putting on. You know this might be the last time you ever see your daughter. As someone marked as a social virus, you are indefinitely stripped of visitation rights. Who you love and who you sleep with is supposed to be private. But the moment you show even the slightest sign how you speak, how you dress, holding someone's hand, you are no longer an ordinary citizen, but a problem. They're not just targeting gay people. They're watching anyone who refuses to hide. Where you once would go to bars or cafes to find community, those places are now minefields. Social life has shrunk into secret gatherings in private apartments, often in remote suburbs with no signs. Without connections or multiple rounds of background checks that feel like political screening, you will never receive the encrypted coordinates to these meetings. Now, the first thing you do when entering isn't greeting others, it's handing over your phone. Government data systems track real-time locations. If dozens of flagged individuals appear at the same coordinates late at night, special police units can break in within minutes. Phones are turned off and sealed in signal-blocking foil bags. In this space, going offline is the only form of safety. These gatherings are not celebrations, they are suffocating. People crowd into kitchens with doors and windows tightly shut. Smoke hanging in the air, voices quieter than a whisper. It's a return to kitchen conversations, where fragments of love and freedom are exchanged. But the slightest sound in the hallway can silence the entire room instantly. In Russia in 2026, socializing is no longer about joy, it's a risky act that could lead to prison. You must cut signals, hide in back alleys, and lower your voice just to breathe a little freedom in suffocating air. Russia's sovereign internet surveillance has reached its peak by 2026. Even private messages on social platforms can trigger alerts if certain words or emojis are used. Authorities have even launched reporting apps, encouraging citizens to report accounts that express non-traditional values. This pervasive digital surveillance has forced the community back to the most primitive form of communication: spoken words. If external repression is a wall, then this psychological dismantling is a kind of corrosion from within. In Russia in 2026, the most brutal weapon is not prison, it is making you slowly wither through self-denial. To survive in society, you must become the kind of person you hate most. By day at work, you don't just hide your identity, you have to appear more anti-gay than anyone else. You loudly praise conservative values. You may even be forced to join anti-LGBTQ plus rallies, holding banners at the front. This high-intensity performance of self is a silent drain. Only late at night, after you return home and lock the door, can you remove the heavy mask. Many people break down the moment they face the mirror because the version of themselves that smiles, nods, and conforms outside feels repulsive. This long-term double life doesn't just exhaust you, it erodes your sense of self entirely. When 90% of your time is spent acting, in the remaining 10%, you can no longer find who you really are. You begin to question, is the obedient, compliant version of me real? Or is the one crying alone in the dark the real one? Many young people say the psychological split is more painful than being locked in a prison. At least prison walls show you where the boundaries are. In this environment, you are your own prison. This emptiness, the inability to know who you are, is slowly destroying an entire generation from within. When society is full of informants, there is no such thing as psychological safety. A glance from a neighbor, a probing question from a colleague, a routine police check, any of these can trigger intense stress responses. Living constantly in a state of fight or flight, the nervous system eventually collapses under the strain. Out of fear of betrayal, many people cut off all social connections. This loneliness is not chosen, it is a form of enforced psychological isolation imposed by the system. By 2026, Studies suggest that rates of severe depression in this group have tripled compared to 2023. When all state media, television, newspapers, social platforms repeat every day that you are abnormal, you are a weapon used by the West, you are a virus, these messages seep into your bones like poison. Even if you know they are lies, your subconscious begins to absorb them. This is the most insidious turning point. You take up the judge's gavel yourself. You no longer need others to accuse you. Begin to monitor your own thoughts. When you feel attracted to someone of the same sex, your first reaction is not joy, but instinctive disgust and fear. You scrutinize your posture, your tone of voice, even your gaze, terrified of revealing any trace of extremity. This is a kind of parasitic identity. It turns a victim into an accomplice of the oppressor. And in the silence of midnight, you replay the same words that once hurt you, using them against yourself until deep down you begin to believe, I don't deserve this kind of love. I don't deserve to exist as a whole person, as an LGBTQ plus person. If some of us can still survive by performing and hiding who we are, then for transgender people in Russia in 2026, there's no escape, only a trapped animal surrounded by walls on all sides. There is no way out, only a tightening noose. The ban introduced in 2023 has, by 2026, become a living prison. The law has cut off all possibility of legally changing your gender. Now, my ID is a death sentence. Because of that ban, I can no longer update my gender marker. Imagine this. I have a beard, a deep voice, yet my passport still carries a female name. This is an identity deadlock. In a city like Moscow, where ID checks are everywhere, I can't buy train tickets, can't access my bank account, and can't even rent an apartment without risking being reported. If the police stop me on the street and see the mismatch, they won't listen to explanations. A charge like forged documents or extremism is enough to throw me straight into prison. Official pharmacies are shut to us, and licensed doctors have been silenced. To keep my body from reverting into something that feels unbearable, I have to risk everything. I meet people in dark alleys, paying high prices for smuggled drugs with unclear labels, unknown ingredients, sometimes even toxic. With nowhere else to turn, many in the community undergo surgeries in rundown apartments, performed by unlicensed individuals without sterilization or anesthesia. What is called self-rescue often becomes self-destruction. Many don't die on the operating table, but from infections afterward. In the corridor of a private hospital in Moscow, you're there with your feverish 7-year-old son. As a closeted father, you've always been careful. But in this society-wide culture of reporting, a single like you gave on a subtle post supporting diverse families has been flagged by data systems and forwarded to local police. When the doctor enters your name into the system, a red warning appears. Abnormal values. Instead of prescribing medicine, the doctor takes your child away under the pretense of further examination. 10 minutes later, it's not the doctor who returns, but police officers and an official claiming to be a psychological correction specialist. In front of you, they declare that you have lost custody. The reason? A father with ideological deviation poses a continuous threat to a minor's physical and mental well-being. Your child is not sent home, but transferred directly to a so-called traditional values boarding school, where they will be taught that their father is an enemy of the state. You're not allowed near the school. When you try to stop the police car, you are immediately charged with endangering national security and corrupting minors. You don't have to harm your child if your thinking is deemed unacceptable. The state simply takes the next generation from you. Here, once your identity is exposed, your career is over. Whether you're a doctor saving lives or a teacher in a classroom, one report is enough to have you fired instantly. Your file will be stamped with labels like morally unfit or extremist tendency. From state institutions to private companies, no one dares to hire someone marked like this. Overnight, you lose your income, your social security, even your right to rent housing. In the end, you wander through this cold country with nothing but a stamped record that defines you. Here, the cost of not conforming is losing everything: family, home, and stability. In Russia in 2026, officials often say, "We don't arrest homosexuals." It may be one of the most absurd lies of the century. The law may not explicitly criminalize your orientation, but it seals off every path in your life. The law doesn't explicitly say your orientation is illegal, but it welds shut every path in your life, your ability to live, access medication, work, and love. What's most terrifying isn't the law itself, but that pervasive, inescapable fear. You never know which colleague, neighbor, or even doctor might be the next person to report you and push you into the abyss. The government hasn't locked you in a physical prison. It has turned the entire city into a vast, invisible cage, forcing you to bury yourself alive. Here, silence is the only instinct for survival, and living your truth becomes a gamble that could cost you everything. This isn't about killing your body, it's about destroying your dignity. The machinery of the state is constantly telling you, want to stay alive? Fine, but you must admit you never truly existed. You must die in silence, lingering like a shadow. The lights of Moscow shine brightly, but they don't reach us. We are still alive, trembling in fear, sweating beneath our masks. But we must remember, even if our names are erased, even if we are trapped in a dead end, as long as we haven't abandoned our true selves, that alone is the deepest form of resistance. They want to paint the rainbow gray, to force us to bow our heads in suffocation. But as long as the soul still beats, we have not been erased. We are living in the deepest darkness, waiting for the dawn,